Alrighty. So with 107 infections recorded last week in children under 5 years old, we've invited consultant pediatrician Dr. Jadine Knight-Laws to talk to us more about gastroenteritis and what's been happening with the spread of this virus, we call it?
Virus.
In Jamaica. Welcome to the show. Good to
Thank
have you.
you.
Morning, Doc.
Good morning.
So you're saying more than 80% of children will in their lifetime get gastro?
Yes, children who are less than 5 years old. The rotavirus, which is the most common cause of gastroenteritis on our side of the world, more than 80% of the kids in their lifetime will have like 1 or 2 episodes of the infection.
And how does one contract the rotavirus? It's viral, clearly, so it's just out there.
And easily spread. So because it's viral, it's on surfaces. So when you have contact with someone who would have been sick, if they indirectly touch a surface, or if you have contaminated food, whether or not they would have had it before, or if it's food that may have been left sitting out for longer times than we would have wanted it to, yes, that's how you catch it. And
Go ahead, finish.
I was going to say that then after exposure, you start to have the symptoms about 1 to 2 days thereafter.
Yeah, I thought it was food that caused it all the time.
No. So gastroenteritis is caused by many different causes. So we're talking about viral because that's what's happening now. And that's the vast majority of cases, but bacteria as well, which is how food poisoning can come about, and parasites as well as just contaminated drink and so on.
Yeah.
So yes.
You kind of already answered the question because most of them will be fine. We had a case, I read a case from the Western End that we lost someone.
Yes,
and
we
it
did.
seemed like they're saying it was because of gastro, but I didn't think it would be something fatal.
So the trick with any illness that causes you to have vomiting and diarrhea in kids is dehydration, and that's why we're trying to have this talk where we can advise parents and guardians that it's not the virus because your body will get rid of it eventually. But when you don't keep up with those losses and your child continues to vomit and we're not replacing the fluid that they've lost, that's how you can die, because dehydration is very serious in kids.
Gastro in itself won't kill you.
The virus, the illness in and of itself won't kill, but the complications, which is dehydration, which can be severe, can kill, I should say.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we looking for in our children? Gastro affects adults too.
Yeah, man, everybody can get gastro. Why
children are particularly vulnerable?
They're particularly vulnerable because they're not so keen on keeping away from their peers who are sick and the hand washing.
Right.
As well as the fact that because of their small body surface area, a little bit of vomiting or a little bit of diarrhea can have a more serious impact.
Okay.
Right.
So what are we looking for among our kids so we can know something is going on?
All right, so usually for gastroenteritis that's viral, the first sign is usually vomiting. So if you notice that your child is having a lot of vomiting, maybe about 2 episodes within an hour, that's a cause of concern, or if they're starting to have a fever. And then usually about 24 to 48 hours thereafter, they will start to have some watery, loose stool. So that's what we call diarrhea, or sometimes just really an increase in the frequency of how you usually pass stool. And there can be abdominal pain as well, starting off early, or discomfort.
Yeah. This didn't come from you, but I'm reading here that they say the infections occur most commonly from November through March. I don't know if you agree with that, but if so, why? Why those months?
I do agree with that. So a lot of those studies are international, and it was called the winter sickness, actually, the winter vomiting sickness, because in the colder months, the rotavirus will thrive a little more. But then also for us in Jamaica, it's not uncommon to see a little rise in numbers at this time as the kids are going back to school and they're starting to interact with each other a little bit more over the summer. So it's just the virus and its pathogenicity as well as the start of the school year.
But in our case, it wouldn't be the winter vomiting.
No, not at all.
We act like fire. So in our case, it's just the fact that you said they are mixing up.
Right. And it is a little colder, I would say. Yeah, as it comes to November, December. So yes.
All right, so we're looking for vomiting, loose stool, more frequent episodes, persistent dizziness.
Yes, so when you start to get dizzy, sometimes when you're feeling a little sick, you can say that you're feeling a little dizzy, but we're concerned that the dizziness may be a sign of dehydration or a drop in your blood pressure, which is why, when you have that, especially if it's persistent, persistent, you want to take your child in to see their doctor or their pediatrician.
And also, I'm reading here, only passing small amounts of urine or no urine at all. That's a showcase of D high, nothing to come out.
Exactly. So if you're passing less urine, no urine, especially over a course of 8 hours, if your mouth is dry, you can look at your child, you see the child is crying and there's just no tears coming from the mouth. Then, or you look and sometimes the eyes are sunken. And very important in kids, kids are resilient. So if you notice that they're just not playing or they're not moving, you're talking to them, they're not responding to you, then that's definitely a sign of dehydration and you should be concerned. Take the child into the doctor.
Yeah. You said earlier that after a couple of days it should pass. What happens if it doesn't after a couple of days?
A couple of days is 2 days? Or?
So the symptoms usually start to get a little better by 2-3 days, but it can take up to 8 days for it to completely stop. So sometimes you can still have a little bit of diarrhea persisting even after then. If it doesn't, you want to take your child to the doctor. So if after 48 hours you don't see any improvement, then certainly you have to come into the doctor. And then there are other things too that make you want to call us right away. So if there is blood in the stool, if there is blood in the vomit, or if the vomit looks green in it at all, or what you'll hear us say coffee ground, so sometimes it looks dark brown like coffee. If the fever is super, super high, so we're talking about 104, 103, and all the signs of dehydration that you mentioned before, take your child right in.
Apart from drinking water and stuff like that, and I'm not suggesting that anyone shouldn't go to the doctor, but if you're at home for some reason and you can't make it, what you can do to kind of ease what is happening.
So you made a great point, because majority of children with gastroenteritis don't come to the hospital because majority of them are mild, and our parents and guardians have been doing a great job of managing it at home. So there are commercially prepared oral rehydration salts available at most pharmacies island-wide, and the pharmacist and the packet will tell you how to mix. There are some that are made into popsicles that the kids will love a little bit more because they can take their time and sip or suck on it. In our setting, yes, some water is good, as well as coconut water. We ask kindly to not give any sports drinks or any undiluted fruit drinks, yes, because they have a lot of sugar. And sugar will pull water into the GI tract and cause more diarrhea.
I was told years ago by a doctor, and obviously you don't want to be lasting forever, but I was told years ago by a doctor, one of my children wasn't so well, and he said diarrhea, vomiting is not necessarily a bad thing because you're kind of getting rid of what is not good inside you. But you don't want it, I mean, if you have vomit forever, then there's a problem. So is that so?
I would say I agree with that, and that's why sometimes when the parents come into the office and they ask, what kind of medication are you gonna give, and we say to them, we're not gonna give anything, we're gonna allow it to pass. They kind of raise the eyebrow at you, because we want that your body is to get rid of this toxin that you would have contracted, from the various ways that I mentioned before. So, and because it's something that's so common, many kids will have it. It's not necessarily bad to get rid of it. It just shows that your immune system is working. But when it goes on for a long time, one, you have to consider if this is really just straightforward GE, and maybe you need to do some more investigations. But then also, two, the concern about the prolonged losses and dehydration.
Let's talk about the children with underlying conditions. That's important. Okay.
So in our condition, sickle cell diseases is quite common, right? So all my parents who have children with sickle cell disease, they're not the ones that you want to kind of wait the 48 hours for. If you have any sort of illness that can suppress the immune system, or if you're on medication like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, so on, then the advice is to be a little bit more aggressive. So even if you think it's mild, it's better to take the child in to the doctor, to the pediatrician, so we can make a better assessment.
Yep. When we started, Sim said last week we had 107. Reading this, and it came out 4 days ago, the Ministry of Health says in Jamaica over last year, an average of 107 infections recorded weekly. Is that a lot? Is that well, they say an average. I was going to say if that's its average, but is 107 weekly not plenty that?
It is a lot, but then just bear in mind that when they come to the hospital, majority of them get their ORS, they get assessed, and they do go home.
What's the ORS?
So the oral rehydration salt, sorry. So that's the salt that you give, the solution you give to rehydrate. So yes, it is a lot, and we've been seeing a little bit more numbers this year, so that's the cause for concern. But
I know why this year we're seeing more than?
I suspect that it has a lot to do with last year. The kids were at home a little more, and then now they're out and more interactive with each other.
Okay, so we're telling parents, what do we tell kids? Wash your hands more regularly, kiddies?
We are definitely saying to wash your hands. Wash your hands. We are doing that for 20 seconds. We're using soap, we're using water, and in cases where water is not readily available, we're using our hand sanitizer. Owners of daycare facilities or places where children gather, disinfect all the common surfaces, the doorknobs, and also try not to leave your food out for a long period of time. Stay home if you're unwell.
What is a long period? I was going to ask you that amazingly, but what is a long period?
It depends on the food. So rice, some people will say don't leave rice out for 6 hours. If it's egg, then you want to eat it.
In the fridge?
Yeah, man, not in the fridge. Yeah. But like out at room temperature. So each food has their own time that they should stay at room temperature. Yeah, and there's also a vaccine that is available against rotavirus.
Which is the
common. There is.
I did not know that.
It always was? We always had that vaccine?
Not always. It's more within the last, I would say, 5 years. Maybe don't quote me on that, but it's a recent vaccine.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Consultant pediatrician, Dr. Jadine Knight-Laws.
All right, coming up, we see how one organization is working to help provide financial assistance to Jamaica's brightest students. We'll be right back.